This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. We'll get back to Operation Chaos in the Trump administration. But on this show, we try to get beyond just the surface skimming headlines and the cloakroom antics in politics, particularly as it pertains to the Trump administration, although certainly that would include Chicago and the state of Illinois as well. Try and give a little bit more value add, make people think a little bit, like Dennis Prager does, our colleague in sound. So today is Milton Friedman's birthday. He's the most important economist in the last 100 years in the world. He made economics accessible to people, to the kind of the average guy, Johnny Lunch Pail and Sally Housecoat, more so than any other economist during his lifetime. And his ideas persist, so today's a good day to give a friend Capitalism and Freedom, or turn a friend on to Free to Choose the book, or Free to Choose the long-running series he did, explaining economics in concrete terms. Like
Which one is your favorite book?
How it impacts your life. Capitalism and Freedom, but his Free to Choose series that he did with his wife, Rose, is excellent. He's
Two lucky people.
he was really kind of a popular figure, like a pop culture figure during his time, in part because of his appearances on shows like Phil Donahue, which was, of course, the long-running afternoon talk show, and where they got into these discussions you don't hear very much today in the cable news world. And you certainly, obviously, daytime programming, everybody's just taking paternity tests. So that's not exactly where we were some 20, 30 years ago. Here's in 1979, one of his more famous interviews and exchanges with Phil Donahue in 1979 about capitalism, and capitalism versus greed, and capitalism versus equality. Listen to this, because now some 30 years later, we're having the same conversations. I mean, almost 40 years later, having the same conversation, the same debate. And, by the way, in many circles, particularly the modern incarnation of the Democrat Party, capitalism is a bad word. Listen to this exchange.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think a communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed, or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us.
Well,
I don't even trust you to do that.
Where do you find these angels that are organized society for us? Is political self-interest so much more virtuous than economic self-interest? Or do you think that politicians act selflessly and courageously? 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636-DA, turnkey.pro text line. There's a message in there for a lot of people nearly 40 years later, talking about capitalism and free trade, President Trump, and understanding that there is no virtue to be found in the collective wisdom of government. The folly of suggesting private vice becomes public virtue when you add a title before someone's name. Political self-interest is more noble than economic self-interest, is it? Does it produce better results? As Friedman said, and many others too, but the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. Well, how many people do that today? The majority? In this state, they do. In a lot of places, they do. The good intentions, because these are virtuous people that are acting selflessly, not in their political self-interest in public office. Does anybody actually believe that if you stopped and thought about it for a second? If you actually watched what people say and compared to what they do, and then asked yourself that question again?
Well, are there any virtuous politicians out there?
Yeah, there are. You know, we're all sinners. We're all inherently bad, and some people do a better job of aspiring to good than other people. Mm-hmm. Some people do a better job of connecting their good intentions to results and measure themselves by results rather than good intentions. Some people try to live the Ten Commandments and the Beatitudes, and other people try less so to do so. So, yeah. I mean, the point is not there's only bad people in government. The point is we're all bad people. So remember that when you entrust so much power in the hands of a few bad people. That's the point. It's not that anybody in public office is any better or worse than anybody else generally. The point is that persuasion and mutually beneficial exchanges are a better way to organize a free society than the command-control direction that we seem to be going, because of exactly what Friedman said at the end of Donahue. Where are these angels that are going to descend to organize our society for us? Yeah, they don't exist. And here's something else in terms of what capitalism has produced. And I'm happy to entertain government-directed research is responsible for some of this. Yeah, okay. Here's what capitalism has produced. Let me start with the premise, and this is a list of 50 reasons we're living through the greatest period in world history that was organized by Morgan Housel over at the Motley Fool blog, and it was recast by Mark Perry over at Carpe Diem blog at the American Enterprise Institute. But the premise is this: only 4% of humans get to live in America, and most people listening to this show, I assume, are among the 4%. We've got it made. Be thankful. We're living in the greatest period in history. For example, 2% of American homes had electricity in 1900. J.P. Morgan, the man, was one of the first to install electricity in his home. It required a private power plant on his property.
Oh, my God.
Even by 1950, close to 30% of American homes didn't have electricity. It wasn't until the late 70s that virtually all homes were powered. Adjusted for wage growth, electricity cost more than 10 times as much in 1900 as it does today. According to the Federal Reserve, the number of lifetime years spent in leisure, retirement plus time off during your working years, rose from 11 years in 1870 to 35 years by 1990 to close to 40 years today. Half your life in leisure. Talking about America here. Median household income adjusted for inflation was around $25,000 during the 1950s. It's nearly double that amount today, real terms. According to census, only 1 in 10 Americans had air conditioning in 1960, rose to 49% in 1973, 89% today. The 11% that don't are mostly in cold climates, so it's choice.
Did you have AC growing up?
Yes. You didn't in Mount Prospect?
No.
Well, but you lived in a nudist colony. You don't want AC. It gets,
No, we didn't.
it
And we finally
shrivels.
got a window unit, so on hot nights, everyone would grab a sleeping bag and sleep on the floor.
There you go.
Because when we were tough, man.
Yeah, right. Growing up in the rough streets of Mount Prospect.
It's the mean streets of Mount Prospect.
Yeah,
You really had central air?
what
That's
a
nice.
what a
Wheaton-
heroic.
Wheaton is so advanced, I had no idea.
Yeah, you've really overcome so much
That's.
from Mount Prospect. Almost no homes had a refrigerator in 1900.
I can believe that.
Today they sell cars with refrigerators in them.
They do. They do.
Adjusted for inflation, the average cost of the cost of an average round trip airline ticket fell 50% from 1978 to 2011. Deregulation. The average new home now has more bathrooms than occupants.
Yeah, the whole thing of have every child having their own bathroom, I just think it sends a bad message. You have to learn how to share.
The cost of an average new car has fallen fourfold since 1915 in real terms. Google Maps is free. If you think about this for a few moments, it's astounding. It's probably the single most useful piece of software ever invented, Google Maps, and it's free
Yeah.
for anyone to use.
I love it.
The average American work week has declined from 66 hours in 1850 to 51 hours in 1909 to 34.8 hours today. Going back to the amount of leisure time.
Mm-hmm.
Incomes have grown much faster than food prices. The average American household now spends less than half as much of its income on food as it did in the 1950s. It's declined cost of food more than 90% since the 19th century. 44% of American jobs were in farming in 1900. Today, 2% are. Because we've become more efficient at feeding ourselves. So we can work, nearly half the population can work on other stuff. A 3-minute phone call from New York to San Francisco cost $341 in 1915.
Wow.
$12.66 in 1960. Today, Republic Wireless offers unlimited talk, text, and data for $5 a month. You need an annual income of $34,000 to be in the richest 1% of people in the world. In the world. To be in the top half of the globe, you need to just earn $1,225 a year. For the top 20%, it's $5,000 per year. Top 10%, $12,000 a year. Top 0.1% in the world, 0.1% requires an annual income of $70,000. America's poorest are some of the world's richest.
Mm-hmm.
Living in the greatest time in human history in America in 2017. Robert in Bloomingdale, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, I don't have a problem with free trade as long as we free trade with countries that share our values. I don't think we should have free trade with China or some communist countries where the government owns 60 or 70% of every corporation. I think that's ridiculous.
Why?
Why? Because they are a population that's 3 times the size of this country, and eventually they will eat us. They will eat us economically because of their population, as long as they stay communist. If they don't stay communist, they'll have a civil war, which will cause all kinds of chaos.
No.
It'll be unbelievable.
No, I don't think so. Thanks for the call, Robert. I don't think so. In point of fact, the reason that China has not realized the economic power of their population is precisely because of what you said at the outset, that the government owns more than 50% of the means of production, and a majority of the Chinese population is poor and, frankly, agrarian still. And so that's why. So actually, the Chinese government remaining communist poses no economic threat to us, really. Not in terms of supplanting us or being the world superpower, because their system of governance precludes it, which is why we should move at a fast pace away from central planning, not towards it. And again, when you talk about trade, you look at trade through the eye of the consumer. That's where the morality is. That's what Walmart did, right? Make everyday goods more accessible for low-income families. That was Sam Walton's purpose in pursuing his capitalist vision that made him one of the richest and his family one of the richest in the world during his ascendancy. And obviously, still, Walmart today employs 1 million people. That's capitalism. Chinese communism, yeah, it's Potemkin. Have you seen the videos of the shopping malls that they build that no one goes to, the shoddy construction? that are empty because they have to find things for people to do because their philosophy is the Chinese Communist Party has the secret knowledge of how to organize society for 1 billion people. And they're wrong. Just as the modern Democrat Party is wrong about organizing society from D.C. for 330 million people. And it's amazing to me, again, as I said at the outset, how many people need to relearn the Econ 101 lessons that Milton Friedman spent his life proselytizing, and thankfully he did. And so many people need to be introduced to them so they don't go down the path of Comrade Bernie and even to some extent Donald Trump in what is all courant in 2017.